My name is Allison Maley, and I am the Governmental Relations, Public Relations Director for the Illinois Principals Association here in Springfield. And with me today, we have Zach.
Yeah, I'm Zach Messersmith from the Illinois Association of School Boards, from the Government Relations Department. Really excited to do something new here with the Facebook Live video. We want this to be really interactive. So if you have questions, please put them in the comments, and we'll get to them as we go along. I think we just wanted to kind of start with a little bit of a background on, I guess, what we're doing here today and why the governor proposed the budget in a speech that is actually set forward in the Constitution, in the Illinois Constitution. Article 8, Section 2 describes this way that the governor has to present the budget. However, it is then the responsibility of the General Assembly to appropriate those funds through legislation. So really the governor and the General Assembly have to work together to get a budget passed for the state of Illinois. So just appreciate you joining us. Allison's going to give some more details on the budget, but once again, if there's anything, if you listen to this speech and have any questions about what might have been presented, please feel free to comment so we can get to those questions. So I'll turn it over to Allison.
Okay, so if anyone listened to the speech, you might have heard Governor Rauner say several times that we want to strive to make Illinois to have schools that are world class and great schools in every community in this state, which is certainly something that we all support here at IPA and with our friends at the School Board Association. So just a few of the details, however, that were shared with us that as part of the governor's proposed budget, he will be supporting a $30 million increase in general state aid. As many of you probably remember, we were actually funding general state aid at the full foundation level this past fiscal year, which is probably the first time in a long time that that's happened. So the gap isn't as large, at least in terms of the foundation level. So an extra $30 million to support the general state aid. The governor is proposing to fully fund the transportation reimbursement, so no more proration for transportation, and also for English language learners, so bilingual education would both be proposed anyway to be fully funded and no longer prorated. In addition to that, an extra $5 million for the E-rate fund. So just a little bit about that. There is some federal matching money available through the FCC and the E-rate that will allow districts to access federal funding to improve their infrastructure and their broadband connections. So again, just allowing communities and schools that don't have that access currently to be able to access some extra dollars to make that happen. So $5 million was in the IASB budget that they proposed earlier this year, and then the governor is supporting that in their budget as well. And we actually support that as Vision 2020. One of the proposals that we've had all along is to help get communities and schools better connected so that kids can access the internet and all the learning opportunities that provides. So that is definitely part of the governor's proposal and something that we would support as well.
Yeah, absolutely. A great thing to hear there, and I think one of the things that in the past it's been a struggle, even if GSA was funded at the foundation level of 6119, mandated categoricals were still really lagging behind, and so it seems like that's the biggest emphasis for the governor this year is to fully fund the transportation mandated categorical along with English language learners. It was said earlier in a briefing that those were two ideas that kind of came out of the Funding Reform Commission. So not necessarily that this is a budget proposal that has deals with the funding formula or a different funding formula, but those were just ideas that were talked about previously. So I think one of the reasons that Allison and I wanted to do this was to get some questions and be able to talk about that. So we actually got some questions earlier. So Do we want to start on those?
Yeah. So we had a question sent in from Kelly. She wanted to know if she specified he is, and I'm assuming that's the governor, going to take away the 6% incentive for retiring educators. So those of you that are out working in the field might know that there is a cap on salary increases toward the end of your career. So that cap right now stands at 6%. I don't know that the governor has proposed anything specific, but there is legislation that would change that cap from 6% to the consumer price index, which right now is somewhere between 1 and 0.6% or so. So it would decrease that cap from 6% to something pretty significantly lower. And so then the school district could still offer that to their employees as a salary increase toward the end of their career, but the school district would be responsible for those costs. So that legislation is pending. It's out there. It's House Bill 671 if you want to follow along this session. But we will be monitoring that as it goes along. And the other question was from Susan. Why is it that the smallest school districts with the poorest students get less funding and are still expected to provide the same services and meet the same standards as bigger schools with more services and more funding? I want our students to meet and be better, but with all these unfunded mandates, how are schools expected to provide these services? And I think that really kind of speaks to what we do here at the School Management Alliance. We want to provide school districts with the local decision making to do what's best for their students within the resources that they have, either from locals or from the state. So we are generally against most unfunded mandates. So that's what Zach and I spend a lot of our time doing and meeting with legislators about when we're at the Capitol. But certainly we sympathize with that comment, and I think that's where our support of the evidence-based model would provide some opportunities for schools to kind of figure out what their local capacity is and what they need to do for the students that they have. So based on the needs of their students, they would adjust their funding accordingly. But we certainly will have more lists, I'm sure, through the Alliance report and other communications about other unfunded mandates that might be coming up that we can solicit your support in trying to talk to legislators about. Want to add anything else?
I think kind of what you touched on there with the evidence-based model, I think that's really something that we've seen a lot of momentum towards in recent years is the idea that we do have a funding problem. Everybody is on board with that, and obviously adequacy and equity are huge parts of that. And I think that's part of what that question got to was the equity concerns from across the state. So I think you touched on it. Great job. And looks like we have a question from Lance.
Yeah.
So
you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure.
We can maybe skip to just the bottom there.
I think we'll talk a little bit about, does the governor have an actual budget, or is he just presenting just his intentions? There were some questions in a previous comment about something that State Senator Andy Minar sent out in an email. This has been kind of a theme in Springfield this week. There's been a lot of, partisan back and forth of who's to blame for the current lack of a state budget, and Democrats generally have pointed fingers at the governor. He's pointed them back at the majority in the General Assembly, and that's kind of been a back and forth. So in the governor's budget speech, there are not a ton of details. However, the governor's Office of Management and Budget will put out more detailed numbers. Some of those numbers at this point are kind of dependent on what some of the local revenues and things like that might come in as. But he's required to present a budget, but it's not what you might consider a budget that has detailed line by line spending. That will usually come at from the governor's Office of Management and Budget.
And I think something we talked about just a moment ago is that the governor is required, or actually you're not supposed to, you're not allowed by law to present a budget that isn't based on current statutes and current law. So, this idea of whether or not the budget was based on the evidence-based model or anything really that the Funding Commission had talked about that isn't in current statute, you can't develop a budget based on it because it's sort of, still floating out there in the ether. So while, we certainly would support any conversations and continued progress on changing the formula, the budget would then be adjusted if that were to become law eventually. But you can't develop the budget and you can't present it that way if something isn't in law currently, which, I think has happened in the previous years where, banking on pension changes or banking on the sale of the Thompson Center and things like that were not happening present day, you really can't factor in those costs or those savings into the budget until those things actually happen.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah. I'll take another question that we got previously about mandated categoricals and this additional payment for transportation and English language learners. The question comes from Freddie O, and it is, what can we do to guarantee that those that money actually gets to the school district level? And unfortunately, that's something that is really difficult at this time. One thing that we think would help that would be it's part of the actual Senate grand bargain. It would be a short-term borrowing that would free up some available cash for the state of Illinois to pay down some of those backlog of bills. Currently, the backlog of bills is, I think, somewhere around $11 billion. So obviously that has a huge effect on everything the state pays for, not just education and mandated categoricals, but this would free up some of that money. It would be short-term borrowing, so it would be an influx of cash to help just with cash flow issues. Think that would be a positive to help ensure that some of those payments that the governor has suggested in his speech actually get made. So.
Well, I think we haven't seen any more questions anyway, so we'll be happy to kind of hang out for just a few seconds here. But always, if you have questions, if you're a member of either of our associations, feel free to contact us at our website. Ours is ilprinciples.org. My email is Allison, ALISON, at ilprinciples.org. If you have any further questions following this broadcast or any time at all, and if you want to share.
It's really unfair. Your email is much simpler than mine.
I'm sorry.
We're at IASB.com. My email is zmessersmith@iasb.com. Happy to always be in communication with our members. If you're not already signed up for our Alliance Legislative Reports, make sure that you can email Allison or I to get signed up for that. There are legislative updates. They usually go out every week during session, and that's a great way to really stay in touch with what's going on with the Alliance. So, anything else?
I think that's it.
All right,
so
we'll wrap it up.
Thanks for everybody tuning in, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, appreciate it.
Take care.